Hi, and welcome to this episode of I've Got This Kid. I'm your host, Dr. Cherina Williams, licensed speech and language pathologist, creator of the Home Goals program, mom of two, and wife of one. Here to share everything speech, language, play, development, and all the other stuff that falls in between. This interview is 2 years in the making, y'all. I recorded it back in 2022. I know, right? And I'm just now getting around to releasing it. But hey, a girl's got stuff to do. My special guest, Julie Kugura, was here, and I will be interviewing her about her personal journey with hyperlexia. There are lots of nuggets for parents, caregivers, providers, and people who identify as hyperlexics. And for you guys who have no clue what that is, tune in because I'm telling you, this conversation will not disappoint. I want you guys to listen to her journey and enjoy because honestly, she's simply awesome. She's transparent and she's going to share things from her point of view. And if you have a chance, check out her most recent TEDx talk. I'm telling you, this girl is on fire. For now, let's tune in. So, Julie, welcome to I've Got This Kid podcast. Tell us about yourself.
Oh, that's such a broad statement. I feel like I'm in a job interview. So basically, and it's actually pretty funny because, this is the perfect question to kind of go off of my disability, which is interesting because I've been diagnosed with symptoms of hyperlexia. And so for me, I always like very direct questions because I feel like tell me about yourself is so broad. Like, right. What do you want to know about me? Because I will gladly tell you, but like it goes through like many different parts of my life. So I'm like, yeah, so what do you want to know? So I'm going to ask that question right back at you.
Okay, no problem. So tell me about your background. Tell me about, let's just start with the journey of hyperlexia. Let's just start there and then we'll get into the now. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
I love how the clinician starts off with an open-ended question for someone. I give you the abstract knowing you need concrete.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting because so I came into this world thinking that you're supposed to memorize everything. Yeah. And so what I mean by that is when I was little, I would read books, right? And I was self-taught, as in no one taught me, but it was really interesting because I read books as a memorization game. So you know how like when you're growing up, sometimes you have those memorization games as in like you flip one card over and then you try to find that other card that matches it. So for me, that was the memorization game of life. So every single thing I tried to memorize. And so when it came to books, I memorized books. So there are times where, I would read the same book over and over and I would start to memorize it. And when it came to reading, when I was younger as a kid, I would say, Mom, like, you don't even have to look at the book. Like, I can tell you it right now. Right. And I would read or not really read it, but, retell it to her word for word. And so, again, I didn't know that you're supposed to visualize because that didn't come into, my brain. And I didn't know you're supposed to do that. Right. And so it's very interesting because I always memorized everything. Right. And so then my second grade teacher said something like, hey, Julie is, something's off with her. Huh. And my parents were a little bit perplexed. And I understand why, because it's like, hold on a second. No, Julie is, memorized all these books and is telling it to us,
what are you talking about?
Exactly. And then what happened is as my mom started to work with me and started to ask me questions about the reading, I could only retell it to her. I couldn't actually analyze what I was reading. And that is when she realized like, oh yeah, like something is off.
Right.
And we didn't know where to go. And then my aunt, who was a special education teacher, she went to a conference, and there's this program called Linda Mood Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they
Popular
helped
program.
with that. And someone actually sat me down and was like, Julie, you're supposed to create images in your head like a movie when you read.
Right.
And at that moment, I was like, what? Like, it was,
Aha moment.
yeah, exactly. There were two things. One, it was, oh my gosh, like, that, really? This is how people read. You're like, nah. And then, but it's like, it started to click. But then the second thing, it was also a little bit heartbreaking, because here I am thinking I am such a genius, right? Like, I can memorize all these different things, like this book. Yeah, I memorized it, so it's like, it was very difficult for me, because it was like, I thought I was so great at this. Right. And then realizing that I'm doing it wrong, oh, that hurt. And so, yeah, that was that moment. And what's interesting about Linda Mood Bell is that they have the right perspective, like, yes, this is what was not necessarily wrong with me, but I wasn't reading correctly.
How to fill that gap.
Correct. So that's what they had, but they didn't have the how to actually visualize. So I actually, even though I went there for many, many years, as in I started Linda Mood Bell in between in between third and fourth grade. And then I did some Linda Mood Bell sessions during fourth grade.
Right.
And then all the way up until sixth grade is when I stopped.
Okay.
But they didn't tell me how to picture. And I always thought I was going to get in trouble if I told them I don't understand. So, because what they do is there's this program, and it's called like picture by picture, or like VV, visualization and verbalization, something like that.
Right.
And so what they would ask me is, I would read a sentence.
Yeah.
And so it was like, the girl jumped over the fence. And then they would ask me so many different descriptive, questions.
To describe it, the 5 W's around it.
Correct. So all of that. But the thing is that I wasn't visualizing it. I was just telling them what I so-called pictured, even though I didn't picture. And then we have to retell everything that we pictured. So then I would just memorize every single thing that I told them. And so then I never actually visualized throughout my educational career.
Wow. So now I have to ask, how did that come into play? How did the visualization start?
Yeah, it's very interesting, because it's not only written, material, it is also oral material as well.
Right.
And there was this actual task that we would have to do. And it was like, they would, tell me, like, give a list of things for me to do. And I would have to say, like, oh, okay, like, yes, I picture myself doing this and doing that.
Right.
Except I never actually visualized. And so with your question is, there was one time, and I was a production assistant over at So You Think You Can Dance. And being a PA, and being a PA, you have to do, various tasks. Yeah. And I was thinking, okay, like, here's a time where I can like try and visualize, and then someone said, hey, Julie, like, can you go get these orange cables in this box, and it's underneath this? And I was like, okay. So like, I was trying to visualize, and then I thought, oh my goodness, this is what people see. This is how people actually visualize. And I was like, wait a second, holy smokes. And so it's still difficult for me to actually visualize, like, especially when people
Right.
talk so fast,
Right.
or, they'll describe something in their house. And I'm like, I still don't understand. So I'll just, go off of my memory.
Right.
But so it's still very difficult, but I am trying.
Right. Right. And so that we just kind of covered y'all from childhood to like today. And so I know it feels like we're going around, but I promise like it's all going to make sense. So Linda Mood Bell was the after school program. That was the intervention that you were receiving at the time. What was school like? Especially let's talk before you guys kind of found out what was going on and post after you found out what was going on.
Yeah. So it's very interesting because it's like pre going on, it was just like, I don't know, me just talking with friends and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it was so long ago that I can't even remember, how I was pre the whole thing. But
Right.
I will have to say that it takes time for me to digest how this learning disability affects me.
Right.
And so for me to realize it too.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, in middle school, I looked up hyperlexia. I was like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then I looked it up and I saw that it is associated with autism. And for me, that actually hurt a lot, as I was like, because I did not want that with my identity. And I am accepting it now, but at the time, I didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
And it was just very difficult for me to actually come to grasp it.
Right.
And so it was very interesting to go through that journey and to be like, oh no, like I do have these autistic traits, and I
Right.
was never diagnosed with autism. But at the same time, as an adult, I kind of wished I was,
Right.
because then like the DSM-5 book, they actually, they mention autism, and
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, I would have had a easier journey getting the 504 plan that I needed, and
Yeah.
all these other accommodations that I needed. And so there's, it's a back and forth between getting a diagnosis and not, but it's also just very comforting to know that there are accommodations out there. So yeah.
Right. Right. And the funny part is like your memorization, that's like your superhero skill in my mind. Like it's what you use in order to like compensate for that area. It's like if someone was without a sense, right? If you lose one sense, then you do what? You compensate for others. Like, for example, we're really great with our eyes, but dogs are pretty much blind and they use their nose and they can like articulate things with their noses that we couldn't even like dare. And don't get me started on the ears. Like, that's a whole nother story. But I mean, I feel like the memorization was like that thing to strengthen you during that process. But I have to ask, you said you looked it up. You looked up hyperlexia because you kind of wanted to know for yourself. And I have to question because I'm all about the little ones. How did your parents or did your parents have that conversation with you about what was going on, or do you feel like the information was kind of just like, oh, you're getting intervention and this is what's happening?
My parents are still today very supportive people, and they always, sat me down and like talked to me about it. My
Right.
mom and I would always have conversations about what worked and what didn't work. And throughout, my whole life, even now, we still have those conversations of what works, what doesn't work. And
Right.
so they have always been supportive. And something that I want to get back on, which is another question that you
Yeah.
probably asked, is that so fifth grade was pretty like elementary school, right? You have one
Right.
teacher.
Right.
You have one teacher. That one teacher has expectations, and that's it. What was difficult for me was sixth grade.
Mm, transition.
Sixth grade was a big, yeah, transition because you have six teachers and they have different expectations of you. Or sorry, five teachers, because I did have a core teacher that taught two different periods,
Right.
language arts and social studies.
I
And
had the same
so,
thing.
yeah, so it was very difficult because all of that transferred over. And again, you're talking to someone who memorizes everything. So I
Right.
didn't know you're supposed to write down notes. That was brand new information to me. I didn't Yeah, and I also didn't know that you're supposed to write down homework. That was brand new information for me.
Oh my God.
And so when it came to it, I tried to memorize every single thing, but it got super overwhelming
It was
that
too
I
big.
broke down. And so my educational therapist actually calls it like the table is collapsing. And
Yeah.
that's what happened is my table collapsed. It was just so difficult to try to memorize everything. And then now to get back to your other question about like family or your parents, for me, it was my auntie Patty, who was a special education teacher.
Okay.
And so she actually tutored me from every single day from
Nice.
sixth grade to 12th grade
Oh,
and
love her
every
already.
single day. So what she did is she organized me and she said, okay, like here, this is what you're supposed to write down.
Yeah.
And I also didn't turn in homework. Sometimes I would do the homework and not know when to
The
turn it
next
in.
step. Right. That the
Correct.
step.
So then it was just so difficult. And so then she sat me down and I mean, I'm not going to say it was perfect at first. You know, there were definitely so many trials and errors.
Yeah.
And it was like, "Julie, where's your book?" "Well, I didn't know we're supposed to bring our book home." Or "Julie, what's your homework to this?"
You said you were tutoring me. So we're gonna
Yeah.
tutor. Like, we're gonna tutor, right? Bring a book for this. Tutoring is
Yeah.
tutoring. Don't you have that, right?
Yeah, and then it was also difficult because then I would have to call my classmates, if I didn't know the homework. And that as a child was like, oh, that it hurt so much because
Right.
it hurt my ego and my confidence because I felt like I couldn't do this. But
Mhm.
luckily I had supported friends in my classes. And so I would always call, certain people up and I would say, okay, what is the homework for
Right.
today? And then they would give it to me and I'd be like, okay, thank you. But like my parents and my family and my aunt had to constantly push me and say like, "Julie, you have to call this person in order to get the homework." And my
Right.
aunt would always say like, I wasn't in class, so I don't know what it is. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, I wish you were in class with me. So
I need
yeah.
an extra. I need an extra.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my gosh. No, it's not your fault. Like, it's not your fault. But it's still
Yeah,
hilarious. I mean, look at now, you can laugh about it. It was funny, but I know it
I
wasn't funny then. I just see
I
it in my
know.
mind playing out. Like, oh my gosh, all she needed was accommodations. Like, just a few
Exactly.
accommodations.
Yeah.
So getting into the 504 idea for you listeners who don't know what a 504 is, it's accommodations for our kiddos who are cognitively like they understand everything that's going on in the class, but there's an accommodation that's needed to make sure that they get along because of Julie's hyperlexia. It just makes it hard sometimes to remember all of the single steps. It's like your recipe, right? If you think about making some cookies or something like that, she's probably going to get back there around 50% of the recipe. And so you might end up with raw cookies one day, or you might end up with cookies without chocolate chip if that's what you were making, because there was no clear cut steps. You have to remember that visualization and organization are those areas that our kiddos who have these hyperlexia is one symptom to where like she is able to read and use memory to compensate for everything. But if you throw like 50 things at her, like she's going to be like, what are you doing to me? Like that's what was happening essentially. So the 504 plan helps with that. And it would have helped with the organization piece. That's why we're cracking up, y'all. Not because we're trying to leave you guys out, because it's hilarious in hindsight. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
something that is also like very difficult is just
Right.
to get the 504 plan. Like
It's a
I was
joke.
actually denied a 504 plan in middle
Really?
school. Yeah, like another teacher had to advocate for me as well, and actually two of them did, um,
Right.
just to say, yeah, Julie actually needs this.
Right.
And so part of it could be because I'm Asian, and so a lot of the school district could have thought like, hey, these parents are tiger parents.
Mm.
And in reality, I was the person that wanted the A's only because then I felt like I could compete with the other children out there. And
Mm.
so my parents just always told me, like, Julie, just do the best you can do. Like, it's okay
Right.
if you get a B. And for me, I was like, but I want that A because
Right.
I want to know that I can actually do this, that
Right.
I can actually be with the other kids because I
Right.
never saw myself as a smart kid. I never did.
Did.
And like, I just always saw myself as hardworking. But if I saw that, like, I got an A, and my mom will say, yeah, Julie, you chased that A, and it didn't matter if you learned or not, which is like, yes, I know. But, it was just really difficult to get those accommodations. And I wish the process was easier.
Right. I wonder, and I think about that piece too, like sometimes our own biases when we're going through these processes, even from the clinical lens, right? If you're not careful, you can say, well, everything is normal. Everything is within the norm, right? We use that word and we throw it out a lot. And it's an important word because it helps us measure like where things are, right? And if everything looks like it's within that average range or above that average range or going all the way up to Einstein genius, then we say, hey, you don't need accommodations. You got it. You've totally got it. And so I can see how, bias would come into play with that, especially when there's like that gap in understanding or the assumption that you're being pushed to do more than what you're supposed to be doing. And, maybe the educator's not even knowing after you leave, the tutoring that you have to do, the classes that you have
Yes.
to take, and the effort just to make sure that you're keeping up with everything that's going on. And so this is when I advocate and I plead to like any listener who's an educator, like listen to the family. I mean, collaborate. Collaborate in a way to where you're hearing and understanding and you're taking these observations and their words very seriously because you just never know. And if you're assuming based on the A, you never know what it took to get to that A. And you're talking about a situation and a person who knows how to memorize everything. And so of course, she's going to get an A because at some point it just becomes like this visual image of what this question or what this concept is attached to. And I also think that we miss out on those deeper learning opportunities that come through that, like the idea that you were in Linda Mood Bell for all of those years and nobody thought to ask like where's the real gap at. It's visualization, it's being able to conceptualize something. And it's almost like based on the way that you described it, it was another way for you to use your superhero power, which is memorizing, to still like get through that process. And so, the blessing to me in that is that you still got through the process because you had a boatload of support. But the sad part for me is I know that there's other kiddos and other adults out there who are going through the same thing now. So I have to ask in all of this, what strategies do you still use today that like are your go-tos, like your killer strategies that like this works. This works for me.
Yeah. For me, it is just my memory and to try and get a routine down. For me, change is very difficult. So, an example is we when COVID happened, right? I was working and I have a long commute. I have like a 1.5 to I would say like 2.5 commute one way.
Wow.
And so for me, at right after, like everything shut down, I actually missed my commute for the first week. And I was
Really?
like, oh, yeah, like I missed seeing the people on the train. I missed seeing when I would do my run. I missed seeing people, that I would see on my run. Like I missed those types of, that routine, but I knew that I have to get a new routine down. And so then I started to get a new routine down. And so that helped me adjust. Change is still very difficult for me,
Right.
as
Right.
something that my mom would say.
And
But, and
uncertainty. I'm
yes,
imagining uncertainty is even worse.
yes, both of those things are just super difficult for me. So a strategy is to like think about all the different things that has helped me along my life. For example, like music and dance, that has helped me, like cope with things in
Right.
a healthy way. And
Right.
so it's really thinking about all of that and actually researching my disability has helped that. So it's like, oh, maybe like as of right now, sometimes I feel alone that I'm the only person with this. But
Hmm.
then once I start researching other, hyperlexia articles, I'm like, wait a second, I feel that way too, and so yeah, I feel a sense of belonging there because I'm like, there, if someone else is doing this type of study, then there are
Right.
more people out there just like me. And
Right.
so that has helped me as well.
Very nice. Very nice. And so with routine, do you prefer like written routine? Do you prefer visual routine? What is like your go-to to like keep that routine going and not miss pieces of the recipe per se?
Yeah. So I would like to give this example as when I worked over at Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Yeah.
It's a very routine-based work environment.
Right.
And so what I mean by that is I like to do the routine myself. So it's like every single day I would come into work at 9:30, even though I don't start at 10. But then we have craft services, and for people who don't know about craft services, it's basically food,
Right.
and a lot of free food. And so then
It is.
yeah. So for every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would eat oatmeal. And I would eat oatmeal, and then I would eat 3 hard-boiled eggs, only the whites, because I don't like the yolk in
Uh-huh.
hard-boiled eggs.
Uh-huh.
And then I would also take fruit, which would only be raspberries and strawberries, sometimes blueberries. And so then, that's what I did every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, it was lox day. So you get
Okay.
bagels and lox.
Yeah.
And so then I would make myself a egg breakfast, like an egg sandwich breakfast, English breakfast. And then I put the lox in there. And so
Right.
then that was Thursday. And then
Right.
Friday, we didn't tape. So then they always had bagels. So then I would label that bagel day. So that is what I mean by
Yes.
routine. And that is just the morning, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
and then it was interesting because same with lunch.
Right.
I would look at what is actually in the kitchen and try to make myself something. And so it's funny because I wasn't open to telling anyone I had a disability, but they saw as like, Julie, you're a creature of habit. And I'm like, yes, I am. And so that's what I mean by a routine. And it definitely helped me, it helped me get organized. It helped me start my day and all of that.
Right. So I feel like we're like all over the place, but I'm so enjoying this conversation because I have to ask, I'm going to ask, what was that process like having to explain to them, like, this is what's going on with me? Um, I can do the work. I'm fine with doing the work. I love my work, but this is what's happening. How did it come about?
It's interesting because I haven't been open about it. Like, at least over at Jimmy Kimmel, I was not open about it. And it has nothing to do with them, it has everything to do with me
Right.
because I didn't feel comfortable enough saying I had a disability. Now, if you think about over at Lucasfilm, I am, a lot more comfortable. And it was just sharing that information because I want, to further my education in doing this work. And that is how that whole conversation came about, is just telling my manager, hey, I'm thinking about going back to school. And the reason why is because I have a disability and I want to further research on that. And she was like, oh, okay. Like, what can I do
Oh
to
man.
make this better? And I was like, oh, no, no,
Wow.
you're doing everything perfect. Like, I'm just letting you know that, I'm interested in this. She was like, oh, okay, just like let me know, if there's anything I can do. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And that has never happened to me before. And so I just love that experience.
Right. So it seems like it's an evolving experience.
Yes. Yeah. I just came out about my disability
I love
in
it.
2019.
It's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and now I'm open about it. So yeah, it's been a tough journey, but very rewarding.
So you have one of the neatest jobs. Like, I think your job is so cool. I just want to know what drew you to wanting to be an associate post-production manager?
So it's very interesting because it all comes back to Jimmy Kimmel.
Huh.
And so for me, um, I was I was like interested in post, but not really interested in post. Is I actually was not even a TV major or a film major. I'm a
Really?
communication studies major because I didn't understand how to communicate with people. So I wanted to definitely understand that. And then I started doing internships within the entertainment business. And then Jimmy Kimmel came along. And so then there was a post production assistant position that came along. And I was
Okay.
like, oh, okay, interesting. And so I applied for that and I got that job. And so what I kind of fell into it. But what I will have to say is that I started getting passionate about it because it had to do with my learning disability or the strengths of it. So,
Right.
what I mean by that is one of my main jobs is, and they told me this in the interview, is that you are going to have to organize the bowl. So you are talking to the person who loves numbers and letters. And so I was thinking, oh, I can't wait to organize this. And so
Yeah.
I logged all the tapes and I actually came up with a post process or a tape process. And so tapes were all over the place. And so then I organized it into like, here's all the field tapes, and then here's all of the show tapes, and I made it go into circles because there are two different columns or two different rows that you can go over. And so then I also made a log of okay, this box is actually out of house in our warehouse and it's in this box number, so then if we ever need to recall it, we can do that. So
Right.
what I'm saying is I loved that because,
Right.
again, as a person who loves numbers and letters, it was
Perfect.
awesome.
Perfect. Absolutely
Yeah.
perfect. And why'd you leave? What made you like just keep going on? What made you keep going on? Because you're not there anymore. I love your job.
Yeah, I'm not there. Yeah,
I
I
love your
definitely wanted to move up and I wanted to move back to the Bay Area, which is where my family is from and where I'm from too. And so I wanted to move back, and luckily Lucasfilm took me. And so
they were lucky to have
aw,
you.
thanks. But it was also just really interesting because as I was talking to my educational therapist, she was saying, Julie, this is the correct job for you. And I was like, what? And
Mhm.
she was like, yeah, because everything is visual. And I said, oh. And then as I started doing more research on hyperlexia, I was thinking, yeah, like I am in the right field. And it's super interesting because it's like now with this job, I get to work on credits. And for all of you people that actually have kids who, have hyperlexia, y'all know that, we love these credits, and to be able to create them means, all the world to me.
Right. Because we look at that long stream with the cool music and the digitals, and that's all you. I love it.
Oh yeah. I mean, of course, there's so many other people that go behind it, but I have, a hand in that, and I really, really enjoy doing it.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So I have to know, what message would you want to send to other families? Like if there were three messages, what would you want to send to them who are maybe at the beginning of their journey or in the middle of their journey or even at the end of their journey? And you can speak to any of that because I know I threw a lot, but speak to whatever you would like.
The thing that I would want to say is to never give up, and to really support your child. If I'm talking to the parents,
Yeah.
really support them, because in the 504 plan meetings, that's when I really saw how my parents were super supportive. Of course, I always felt it, but when you're in those meetings, and for me, I was always very like nervous, I was embarrassed,
Yeah.
and to have my parents actually advocate for me and to see that, right? So sometimes I don't see a lot of it because they're, writing emails to my teachers and stuff, or writing letters like, oh, here's a letter from my mom. But like to actually see that in action meant the world to me, because they would always say, you don't see everything that we see. Julie works 2 to 3 times harder than any other kid out there. You
Right.
are, you're not giving her these accommodations. And so to really support your child in that way. And if I'm talking to the actual person who has a disability, it's to never give up. Like there have been so many people, teachers, coaches, all these different people that have said, you're not going to make it, and to really rise above that. Like I had a teacher say that I wouldn't make it through high school, and I was in middle school. I had a college counselor, or like one of those people that trying to get you into college, and I told them what colleges I wanted to go to, and they said, you're not going to get in because of your poor SAT scores. And somehow I got into the top three that I wanted to go into. And so just really, stay true to who you are and to not give up, because again, I am very privileged to have a support system, but again, just don't give up on yourself.
That was beautiful. That was a beautiful thing. I love it. I love it. So you got to tell me our final question. And this is like whoop whoop because we were talking about this before recording. How do you want to take your knowledge about hyperlexia and use it for the future? Because honestly, to me, listening to you and talking to you, I think that your journey is just an amazing journey. It's not over. I don't think it's close to being over. I think that there's so much more ahead for you. But how do you want to use this? Because, we've learned, like, I know for me, like the message that I got from undergrad all the way through grad school is lifelong learning, lifelong learning, lifelong learning. Like you're always lifelong learning. And even without someone telling you that, you've been persistent with understanding hyperlexia and understanding how not only it affects you and how it affects your day to day and just that level of understanding, but like the world around you and other people who are going through these same trials and these same steps. Because for one, there's not a lot of information about hyperlexia out there unless you're experiencing it. For two, it can get confused with genius savant if you're not sure. And that doesn't mean that there's not a level of genius savant there. It just means that like we have to make sure that we're compensating in these other areas. But I say all that to say you're a lifelong learner. And I just want you to share with the people how you plan on using this for the future.
Yeah, so what I plan to do is I plan to keep researching, but I also want to share this research with everyone. Meaning, I don't have to do this, right? Like, meaning I'm the person who says, like, I don't need to be the person who does this. Someone else can do it as well. So I am not competing with anyone. I just want research out there. And so for me, if I can provide, some research out there, that'd be awesome. And I am getting my master's in psychology over at Pepperdine as I'm working full time, and I will be doing online classes. And it really is to get more research out there. And so far, and I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I have not seen anything that has to do with hyperlexia, comprehension, and the lack of visualization attached to that poor comprehension. That is what I'm hoping to actually explore.
Right. I have not. And even when you were talking about it, I was like, why aren't there tools around that? And this is when the advocate in me is always like, we have to listen and we have to ask questions. Like, we can't make assumptions as the professional because we have this level of knowledge that you're the smartest one in the room and you have this information and you're just gonna, what's best. Like, it's a collaboration. Like, yes, we have this foundational knowledge, but we also need to hear from the perspective of the person who is actually experiencing this. And for me, by fifth grade, like, you could explain some of that. Like, fourth grade, you could explain some of that. You could put a word to that. And while you were talking about it, I just kept seeing in my mind, why weren't they doing visual activities? Why weren't they having her sit down and draw stuff out to build up on that skill? Because that's what I see happening. If somebody can't visualize something, then you're going to do everything around visualizing. And if I know you're going to memorize everything, then I'm staying away from any kind of question that would come into play. And so I think that not only is your research needed, but your research is necessary. And it's so funny how this is how we came to be, is because somebody sent in a question and they wanted to know because their toddler was showing signs of hyperlexia. And I even spent a lot of time digging to make sure that I had firm knowledge and understanding from a lot of different sources, not just from a textbook 20 years ago, but what did it say? What is it saying? What do we know today? And there's a lot to unfold with that. And so again, I think that your knowledge and what you're trying to research is necessary. I think from your perspective, because you're living this day in and day out, is necessary. But I think these are already things that you know. You don't need me telling you that. And so I'm excited about your work that's coming. I applaud you for all that you're doing, and you're coming out in 2019. Because I believe that a lot of lives globally are going to be impacted by your work.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me on here.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Did I not tell y'all how amazing Julie is? World changers, we have to listen to the people we love and that matter the most. They're relying on us to be advocates and voices on their behalf. Tooling up with understanding is one way we can do this, and that's why you guys are here. I'm so glad you guys listened in. Listen up. Join me in 2 weeks where I will be rethinking services. Sounds heady, but it ain't. I'm never that heady, right, y'all? I'm going to be simply teaching us how to benefit from services and some little small proactive things that we can do along the way. But like anything else, I'm going to tool you guys up with information with real strategies that will be beneficial to you. Transcripts and show notes will be available following this episode at I'veGotThisKid.com. You can also find past podcasts, past blogs, and other tools that you can get started using today. Also, Christmas is coming up next week, and if you have, not finished your list and you got a few things to get, like me, Home Goals Parent Education Program is a great holiday gift. You can gift that to somebody and tool somebody up for Christmas. Like, what could be better than education about development, right? Well, in my world, right? Finally, y'all, find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and join my YouTube channel. Until the next time, world changers, Merry Christmas. Take care.